The police
Here's your
officer
ticket.
was
Try to
ticketing
smile.
the black
Is this
man
really
when she
necessary,
said,
officer?
"If you weren't
Rules are
married,
rules, handsome.
I'd
see.
give you my number."
Look at these messages.
Officer
This
Jennifer
is real.
Walsh's
This is
condescending
sick. We
smile
have to call
sent a
someone.
chill down
I know,
Daniel
I'm trying.
Thompson's spine as she handed
Officer,
back
the evidence
his
is
driver's
right there.
license
How do you
along with a
plead?
$300
Answer, no
ticket.
more lies.
At 34,
No, please, this can't
an
be happening.
aerospace engineer
moving,
with
ma'am.
a degree
My
from
career
MIT
is over.
and owner of a technology consulting firm that brought in millions. Daniel never imagined he would be reduced to an object of racial fetishism on a random Tuesday afternoon. "Excuse me, what?" Daniel asked, still processing the words he had just heard. Jennifer leaned against the BMW's window, her eyes deliberately scanning the interior of the car before settling on his face. "I said, you're lucky to be married. Otherwise, I'd be interested." She paused deliberately. "I've always had a thing for exotic men." The word exotic echoed in the air like a slap. Daniel felt his stomach churn, but he kept his composure. 15 years in the corporate world had taught him to recognize racism disguised as a compliment. And this woman had just crossed every line imaginable. "I see," he replied with a calmness that surprised even himself. "Can I leave now?" Jennifer laughed as if sharing an inside joke. "Of course, dear. But if things change at home," she slid a business card through the window. "Call me. I love diversity." Daniel took the card without looking, placed it in the center console, and started the car. In the rearview mirror, he saw Jennifer typing something on her cell phone, probably reporting yet another conquest to her friends. What she didn't know was that Daniel had recorded the entire conversation. As he drove home, a cold anger took hold of him. It wasn't just the unfair ticket. After all, he was really a few miles over the limit. It was the calculated humiliation, the reduction of his humanity to a sexual stereotype, her absolute confidence that he should feel flattered by the attention. Daniel Thompson had built a company from scratch, employed 43 people, and had contracts with NASA. But to Officer Walsh, he was just another black man who should be grateful for a white woman's attention. When he got home, his wife Monica immediately sensed that something was wrong. "What happened?" "Nothing I can't handle," Daniel replied, kissing her on the forehead. In 15 years of marriage, Monica had learned to read that tone of voice. It meant her husband was about to do something that would change everything. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He stayed awake browsing social media, discovering that Officer Walsh had a long history of questionable behavior with black men during police stops. Several similar reports, always filed away, always ignored. But this time would be different. Daniel smiled in the dark as he planned something Walsh would never forget. If you're enjoying this story of justice, and want to find out how a simple moment of humiliation became the catalyst for a lesson no one would ever forget, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Over the next 3 days, Daniel discovered that Jennifer Walsh's card was not just an impulsive gesture. It was part of a systematic and disgusting pattern. Monica noticed the change in her husband's behavior on Thursday night. "You've barely touched your food. What's going on?" Daniel hesitated, then showed her the card Jennifer had slipped through the window. "A police officer gave me this during a traffic stop. She said she has a thing for exotic men." Monica's face contorted in disgust. "You're joking." "I wish I was." Daniel opened his laptop, but it gets worse. Much worse. He had spent the last 72 hours researching Officer Walsh on social media. Her Instagram was a veritable museum of racial fetishes disguised as diversity. Photos with black men at parties, always with captions like, I love meeting different cultures and diversity is everything. Her friends' comments were even more revolting. You and your type, followed by eggplant emojis. Look at this. Daniel clicked on a photo of a barbecue. Jennifer was hugging 3 different black men, all of whom looked clearly uncomfortable. The caption read, "Collecting special memories." Monica covered her mouth with her hands. That's sick. Daniel had discovered more. Jennifer frequented a Facebook group called Interracial Dating Queens, where white women shared conquests with black men like trophies. Private messages that some of Jennifer's former targets shared anonymously on online forums revealed a disturbing pattern. She stalked them, fetishized them, and then discarded them when they refused to be reduced to sex objects. She's done this to at least 12 men in the last 2 years, Daniel muttered, scrolling through anonymous screenshots. Always during police stops, always abusing her authority. What angered Daniel most was not just the personal humiliation. It was knowing that Jennifer used her police badge as a tool for sexual predation. How many black men had been unfairly pulled over because they refused her advances? How many were too afraid to report her because of the institutional power she represented? Monica watched her husband with growing concern. 15 years of marriage had taught her to recognize that expression. Daniel was processing, calculating, planning. What are you going to do? What any engineer would do. Daniel replied calmly. I'm going to solve the problem systematically and definitively. On Friday, Daniel received a text message from an unknown number. Hi, exotic babe. Still thinking about me? That wedding ring doesn't have to be permanent. It was Jennifer. She had gotten his number through the police system, and was now literally harassing him via text. Daniel screenshot the message and added it to his growing folder of evidence. For a moment, he felt a surge of anger that surprised him. It wasn't just about him. It was about all the men she had humiliated. All the time someone like him had been reduced to a sex object by someone who was supposed to protect and serve. But Daniel Thompson hadn't built a multi-million-dollar company by reacting with anger. He had learned that the most complex problems required elegant solutions. And Jennifer Walsh was about to find out that she had chosen the wrong man to be her newest trophy. That night, Daniel did something he hadn't done in years. He called his brother Marcus, a civil rights lawyer in Los Angeles. I need a favor, he said simply. Each new humiliation only strengthened something inside him that the arrogant officer couldn't see. A quiet determination fueled by the very injustice she tried to normalize with her badge and condescending smiles. Marcus Thompson arrived in Denver the following Monday, carrying 2 suitcases, and an expression Daniel had known since childhood. Absolute determination masked by professional calm. At 36, Marcus had built a formidable reputation defending victims of racial discrimination in Los Angeles, and his firm had a 94% win rate against corporations and public institutions. So, Marcus said, spreading the evidence Daniel had collected across the kitchen table. Our dear Officer Walsh isn't just a sexual predator. She's a systematic sexual predator using police authority. Daniel watched his brother methodically analyze each screenshot, each text message, each Instagram post. Marcus had developed a surgical technique for dismantling seemingly impossible cases. And watching that mind at work was like watching a master craftsman at work. She's committed 3 federal crimes in the last 2 weeks alone, Marcus muttered, taking notes. Sexual harassment, abuse of authority, and racial discrimination. But the problem isn't proving it. The problem is that she probably has institutional protection. Daniel wasn't surprised. How many men like me do you think have reported her and been ignored? Probably dozens. Marcus picked up his cell phone and started dialing. But this time will be different. You've documented everything. You have the resources to fight. And most importantly, he smiled with a confidence that made Daniel shiver. You have a brother who has spent his entire career destroying people like her. While Marcus made the first of many strategic calls, Daniel received another message from Jennifer. I thought you'd be more fun. Crying face. Men like you are usually more responsive. What a shame. The phrase men like you echoed in Daniel's mind like a poisonous echo. Jennifer was literally categorizing him by race, reducing him to a sexual stereotype that existed only in her sick mind. Daniel showed him the message. She really believes that every black man should be flattered by her attention. Marcus paused the call and read the message. His expression hardened. Screenshot now. And give me her number. Why? Because, Marcus said with a dangerous smile. I am going to introduce myself as her single cousin from Los Angeles. We are going to give her exactly what she thinks she wants. Over the next 48 hours, Marcus conducted what he called Operation Honeypot. He created a fake Instagram profile using photos of a hired model, introducing himself as Marcus, Daniel's cousin, a successful lawyer, and recent divorce. Jennifer took the bait with a veracity that surprised even Marcus. The messages she sent to the fake profile were pornographic, racist, and completely incriminating. She spoke openly about her collection of black men, shared intimate photos that other men had sent her, a federal crime, and even offered special encounters in exchange for favors during police stops. Jesus Christ, Monica whispered, reading the messages over Daniel's shoulder. She's literally offering sex in exchange for police corruption schemes. Even better, Marcus said, printing everything out. She just documented an entire network of corruption. Look at the names she mentions. 3 other police officers, 2 supervisors, and a municipal judge. Daniel realized they had stumbled upon something much bigger than individual harassment. Jennifer Walsh was just the tip of an iceberg of systematic corruption that used racial fetishization as a tool of power. But Jennifer, drunk on her own arrogance, kept digging her own grave. She began sending Marcus screenshots of conversations with other black men she had collected, including photos of men in intimate situations, who clearly did not authorize distribution. She's distributing non-consensual pornography, Marcus said, almost unable to believe his professional luck on federal property. That's a guaranteed prison sentence. Daniel, however, wasn't just interested in prison. He wanted something more poetic, more devastating. He wanted Jennifer Walsh to experience the same humiliation she had inflicted on dozens of black men. That's when Monica had a brilliant idea. The police department is doing that diversity and inclusion campaign next month, remember? She said, showing a flyer that had arrived in the mail. A huge public event broadcast live with a goal of improving community relations. Daniel and Marcus looked at each other. The same thought had occurred to both of them simultaneously. How much time do we have? Marcus asked. 3 weeks, Monica replied. Marcus smiled. More than enough time to prepare a presentation that the whole city will never forget. Over the next few days, Daniel noticed that Jennifer was becoming more aggressive and desperate. Her messages oscillated between predatory seduction and veiled threats. She had clearly interpreted his silence as resistance that needed to be broken. "You know I can make your life very difficult, right, sweetie?" A message arrived on Thursday. "Police officers have many ways of finding people we are interested in." It was exactly the kind of threat Marcus had been waiting for. "Perfect," he said, screenshotting the message. "Now she's crossed from harassment to criminal intimidation using police authority. Any judge in the country would convict her on that alone." Daniel, however, knew that a criminal conviction would not be enough. Jennifer Walsh needed to be exposed publicly in a way that would show the entire community the kind of predator who walked the streets with a badge and a gun. It was when Marcus showed him the final schedule that Daniel realized his brother had turned Jennifer Walsh's own arrogance into the tool of her destruction, and that in exactly 17 days, that woman would discover she had picked the wrong victims. The Denver Municipal Theater was packed for the event. Diversity and inclusion, building bridges in our community. 300 people, including local officials, community leaders, and the entire police department leadership, watched the live broadcast that would reach over 50,000 views online. Jennifer Walsh was beaming in the front row, wearing her most impeccable uniform. She had volunteered to be one of the keynote speakers, eager to talk about positive relationships between police officers and diverse communities. What she didn't know was that Daniel Thompson was sitting discreetly in the fifth row with Marcus at his side and a black briefcase on his lap. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced Chief Peterson from the center microphone. "Our next speaker is Officer Jennifer Walsh, who has been instrumental in our efforts to reach out to Denver's black community." Jennifer took the stage with a confident smile, adjusted the microphone, and began, "It's a pleasure to be here today to talk about how we can build more intimate, closer relationships with all communities." Daniel noticed the Freudian slip and smiled. It was time. He stood up calmly and walked over to the audience question microphone. "Officer Walsh, I have a question about intimate relationships with the community." Jennifer froze as she recognized the voice. Her eyes found Daniel among the hundreds of faces. And for the first time in months, the condescending smile completely disappeared. Sorry, what was the question?" she stammered. "Could you comment on this message you sent me 3 weeks ago?" Daniel held up his cell phone, connecting it to the theater sound system. Jennifer's voice echoed through the speakers. "You know I can make your life very difficult, right, sweetie? Cops have many ways of finding people we are interested in." A murmur of shock rippled through the audience. Jennifer visibly paused, gripping the microphone tightly. That's out of context." "Is it?" Marcus stood up, introducing himself. "Marcus Thompson, civil lawyer. Would you like me to provide more context?" The giant screen behind Jennifer lit up, showing screenshots of the dozens of messages she had sent to Daniel. Every word of racial fetishization, every predatory comment, every veiled threat was projected in bold letters for the whole city to see. "I love diversity," Daniel read aloud from one of the messages. "Exotic men are my weakness. Officer Walsh, is this part of your community relations training?" Jennifer tried to leave the stage, but Chief Peterson gestured for her to stay. The live stream continued, and the view count skyrocketed. 75,000, 80,000, 90,000 people watching her humiliation in real time. "But wait," Marcus continued, "there's more. Officer Walsh, could you explain this conversation with my cousin Marcus from Los Angeles?" The screen switched to the pornographic messages Jennifer had sent to the fake profile. The audience gasped collectively as they read the graphic descriptions of her collection of black men, the intimate photos she had distributed without consent, and most notably, her explicit offers of sexual favors in exchange for leniency during police stops. "Turn that off," Jennifer screamed, trying to reach the presentation controls, but it was too late. The internet had captured everything. Daniel took back the microphone. "Officers present, how many of you recognize the names mentioned in Officer Walsh's messages? Sergeant Davis, were you aware that your colleague was offering special favors to black men during police stops in exchange for privileged information?" Sergeant Davis sank into his chair, realizing that his own participation in the scheme had been exposed. 3 other officers began to discreetly leave the theater, but Daniel had anticipated this. "Oh, and for those of you trying to leave," Marcus announced calmly, "the FBI is waiting at the door. You are all under investigation for federal corruption." Jennifer collapsed into her chair on stage, her hands shaking uncontrollably. The woman who for years had reduced black men to sex objects, who had abused her police authority to feed her racist fetishes, was now being seen by the entire city for exactly what she was: a uniformed sexual predator. Chief Peterson took the stage, visibly shaken. "Officer Walsh, you are suspended effective immediately. A full investigation will be—" "That won't be necessary," Daniel interrupted. Marcus opened a folder and handed documents to the chief. "Here are copies of all the evidence already turned over to the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and the Civil Rights Commission. Officer Walsh and her accomplices will be criminally prosecuted for sexual harassment, abuse of authority, distribution of non-consensual pornography, racial discrimination, and police corruption." Jennifer finally found her voice, but only to whisper, "How could you? How could you?" Daniel approached the stage, his voice now audible throughout the theater. "Officer Walsh, for years you reduced men like me to racist sexual fantasies. You thought you could use your badge to intimidate us, objectify us, collect us like trophies, but you made a fatal mistake." He paused, allowing the silence of the theater to amplify his next words. "You picked the wrong victims." The screen behind Jennifer now displayed a list of the 12 black men she had harassed during police stops over the past 2 years. All had come forward as witnesses after Marcus' investigation. All willing to testify about the systematic pattern of sexual predation Jennifer had established. "Your badge no longer protects you," Daniel concluded. "And your fetishization of black men has just become criminal evidence in a federal court." Jennifer Walsh, the woman who for years had used her authority to degrade and humiliate black men, was now being carried out of the theater in tears, while 100,000 people watched her complete destruction online. As Jennifer was escorted away by the very colleague she had compromised, Daniel realized that true justice lay not only in public humiliation, it lay in the message that would echo far beyond that theater, that uniformed predators would finally face the consequences of their racial crimes. 6 months after what the press dubbed the municipal theater scandal, Daniel Thompson sat in his renovated office, looking out the 10th floor window at the city that now knew him as the man who had exposed the largest network of police corruption in Denver's history. The federal investigation had expanded far beyond Jennifer Walsh. 17 officers had been indicted, including 3 supervisors and Sergeant Davis himself. The municipal judge Jennifer had mentioned in her messages had been removed from office and now faced charges of illicit favoritism. But Jennifer's fate had been particularly poetic. Mr. Thompson, his new assistant, Rebecca, appeared at the door. "The CNN reporter is here for the interview." Daniel smiled. In the last few months, his company had grown 340%. Government contracts that had once been unimaginable now arrived weekly. NASA had expanded its agreement to include consulting on security systems, and 3 universities had invited him to speak on justice engineering, a term he had coined to describe the application of systematic thinking to the resolution of social injustices. But the most rewarding thing was not the financial success. It was knowing that Jennifer Walsh now worked as a salesperson in a department store after having been fired from the police force, criminally prosecuted, and becoming persona non grata in Denver. Her former collectibles had joined together in a class action lawsuit that resulted in $2.3 million in compensation distributed among the victims. Marcus had moved permanently to Denver, opening a law firm specializing in racial discrimination cases. The Thompson duo had become legendary in legal circles. The engineer who systematically documented injustices, and the lawyer who turned them into devastating victories in court. How does it feel to be called the man who reformed the Denver police? The CNN reporter asked, adjusting the microphone. Daniel laughed. I didn't reform anything. I just reverse-engineered institutional racism. Jennifer Walsh and her accomplices built a system of oppression so arrogant that they documented their own crimes. I just optimized the distribution of the evidence. What Daniel didn't mention in the interview was the call he had received the week before. Jennifer, desperate and bankrupt after the lawsuits, had tried to contact him asking for forgiveness and a second chance. The irony was delicious. The woman who had fetishized black men for years was now begging for mercy from one of the men she had tried to degrade. Daniel had listened silently to her sobs over the phone, then replied calmly, Jennifer, you spent years reducing men like me to sex objects. Now you're finding out what it's like to be reduced to the consequences of your own choices. It's not fetishization, it's justice. Monica watched her husband with growing pride. The man who had been humiliated on a random Tuesday afternoon had become the most respected civil rights advocate in Colorado. Universities invited him to speak. National organizations sought his advice, and the federal government had created a protocol based on his methods for investigating institutional discrimination. You've changed, Monica said that night as they ate dinner at home. You didn't just avenge an injustice. You turned pain into power. Daniel reflected on his wife's words. Jennifer Walsh had tried to reduce him to a racial stereotype, but she had inadvertently awakened something much more powerful, the determination of a man who discovered that his true strength lay not in anger, but in the ability to turn injustice into systemic change. The phone rang. It was another black man from Phoenix, victim of similar harassment by a police officer, who had apparently learned from Jennifer through social media before the scandal broke. Marcus was flying to Arizona the next morning. Do you know what Jennifer's fatal mistake was? Daniel said to Monica, hanging up the phone. She thought I would be flattered by the attention, that men like me should be grateful when white women choose us for their racist fantasies. Daniel walked to the window, watching the city lights. But Jennifer didn't understand one fundamental thing. Men who build empires from scratch aren't flattered by crumbs of attention. We create systems. Daniel's story had inspired an entire generation of victims of discrimination to document, organize, and strategically respond to the injustices they faced. The Thompson Protocol, his methodology of systematic evidence collection and coordinated public exposure, was being taught in law schools and social activism circles across the country. Jennifer Walsh had tried to collect black men like trophies. Instead, she had inadvertently created the catalyst for the biggest police reform Denver had ever seen. 17 careers destroyed, millions in damages paid, and an entire system forced to restructure. The best revenge, Daniel murmured, looking at the framed photo of his MIT graduation, is not to destroy those who hurt you. It's to build something so great that they become irrelevant. Monica approached, hugging him from behind. Jennifer Walsh tried to reduce you to a sexual fantasy. She ended up turning you into her nightmare. Daniel smiled. No, she ended up reminding me of who I've always been, an engineer who solves problems. Jennifer was just another flawed system that needed to be fixed. 6 months after that humiliating afternoon in traffic, Daniel Thompson had turned the injustice he suffered into the tool of his rise. Jennifer Walsh remained in Denver, but now is a living example of how racial arrogance can completely destroy a life. She had tried to fetishize black men and discovered she had chosen the wrong man to be her newest trophy. True justice isn't about bringing down those who humiliated you. It's about rising so high that they become incapable of reaching you again. Daniel learned that the best revenge isn't to retaliate against the racism he suffered, but to build a legacy so powerful that it rewrites the rules of the game forever. If this story of turning humiliation into power has inspired you, subscribe to the channel to discover more real stories of people who have turned the worst injustices into their greatest victories. Because sometimes being underestimated is the biggest advantage you can